Now I want to go over how to solve absolute value equations. And to do so, I'm going to introduce you to a mnemonic. This mnemonic is called ISS, for isolate, separate, solve. It doesn't stand for what you think it stands for. I know none of you guys have ever experienced ISS here at school. All right, so let's talk this over here. Isolate means to isolate the absolute value, so it's on one side of the equation by itself and everything else is on the other side. We'll look at a graphic of that in a minute. Separate means that once we've isolated, we're going to break this into two linear equations. One equation is going to be equal to a value c, and the other one is going to be equal to a negative c. And then we're going to solve those equations. So we're going to solve each of those two equations separately, and we're going to end up with two different answers. One, assuming that the stuff in absolute values was originally a positive, and the other assuming it might have been a negative to start with. Let's talk again about our steps to solving, but this time with a graphic that shows you these steps. So our first step is to isolate the absolute value. I recommend that you highlight the absolute value so that you can see that it's isolated. If you had seen any number out here multiplied, or maybe at the back over here added or subtracted, then that would not be isolated, and we would need to do that first. In this particular case, we have already got isolation here. We notice that c is a positive value, and so we are going to break our solution into two separate pieces. Notice that we are getting rid of the absolute value bars, and now we just have a linear equation in the form of ax plus b is equal to c. And our second possibility is that we could have ax plus b is equal to negative c. So this is the separation step. Finally, we would just go through and solve each of these two equations for x, and those would be our solutions. So there are three types of solutions. The most common is that we will have two solutions. We will break our equation into two pieces like I showed you above, and we'll write those two solutions in set notation with the least number first and then the greatest number second. So if we have an equation, ax plus b is equal to c, is what we're starting with, so it's already isolated. We're going to break that into our two linear equations, ax plus b equals c and ax plus b equals minus c, and solve each of those, come out with two different answers. The second possibility is that we might have no solutions. For example, if we had the absolute value of x plus 2 is equal to negative 3. This negative 3 is actually not possible. Remember that an absolute value always has to return a positive number. So if we have a negative number to start with, then it's not possible to solve it. Be sure that you isolate the absolute value first before deciding that there's no solution though. Let me show you an example where something might look like it has no solution, but it turns out that it does. So if I had x plus 2 minus 4 equals negative 3. So the difference between that and the one that we did up here is that I have that minus 4 on the left. Remember our first step. We have to isolate the absolute value. So that means I would have to add 4 to both sides. And when I add 4 to both sides, I have x plus 2. I've now isolated the absolute value. So here's my absolute value right here. And if I move that 4 over, now I have negative 3 plus 4, which is 1. It's no longer a negative number on the left-hand side. So this looks like no solution, but really we have two solutions because we have a positive number there. The last thing that could happen is that we could have one single solution. And the way that that would happen is when we have something called an extraneous solution, or you can just remember the word extra. An extraneous solution means that When you try plugging that number back into your original equation, it doesn't work. It doesn't return a true statement. We're not going to talk about that until day 2. All right, pause, rewind this video if you need to in order to catch some of the information that I was giving to you. And then in the next video, we will start to solve.